So Shabbat Shalom. Welcome everyone to Christ of the Church. Our Sabbath class on today. We welcome you into this class, into our study, giving praise, glory unto our Father and His only begotten Son, who has given us life and has kept us down through the years. And we welcome everyone, all the kings and the queens. We salute each and every one of you. All of our brothers and sisters that are in Christ Jesus, we certainly welcome each and every one of you, and we are thankful for this day that He's given us to be yet in the land of living and to work out our salvation, to work this thing out with the days and the time that He's given us. So today's class we're going to be looking at, as we normally do on the Sabbath, just going back into Israel, the nation of Israel. And I know some might question, why is that important? Why do you even want to focus on the history of Israel and everything? But in order to know the Messiah and Christ, and in order to understand what salvation is, you got to know where He came from. And the warnings that He gave us, that we have to be extremely careful, especially in the last days, because there's going to be false Christs and false prophets. Well, if you don't know the origin, if you don't know the plan, if you don't know the covenant, if you're totally ambivalent to the covenant, the origination of the covenant, why Christ came, and if that doesn't have any bearing on your walk or your faith in Him, then it'll be easy for you to fall into the trap of deception and be deceived by what's out there. Jesus had said something in his ministry when He was here on earth, and He said that this gospel must be preached to every nation, and once it has been preached to every nation, then shall the end begin. Well, if you don't, what we need to understand is what gospel did He mean? What did He actually mean? Because if we say that the gospel that came from the Roman Catholic Church, coming out of the 2nd and 3rd century, that gospel has reached the world. It has gone to every nation. Every nation around the world knows of the Roman Catholicism and the Roman Christ. Every nation knows that, and so we're still here. So Jesus wasn't speaking of Roman Catholicism becoming global and Roman Catholicism going into every nation. And I know a lot of us who are naming the name of Christ and have departed from iniquity. We say, hey, we're not even connected at all with Roman Catholicism. That's not a part of our service. That's not a part of our worship. We don't have anything to do with that at all. But having a blank knowledge of history and not knowing where all of it originated from and how it progressed through time, one can easily be trapped in deception and not even know it. It's sad. I was thinking on my way to class today, I was thinking how the synagogue of Satan, the claws and the tentacles of the synagogue of Satan, and how it has reached every known nation that is a country, is a nation. How it has reached every continent, and how it has reached into the governments, our monetary system. I mean, it's so vast and it's so intricate into everything. I would be foolish. I would be foolish to bury my head in the sand and not want to recognize the confrontation that is going to lie ahead for each and every one of us. And so just through the study of the Bible and His Word, The first thing the first scripture I want to go to is Romans 15:4, because Paul, the apostle Paul, especially when he wrote to the Romans, which was a Gentile nation, but he wrote to the Romans and he referenced about 100 times in his writings to the Romans. He references the Old Testament, what we call Torah or the Tanakh. He makes numerous references to Torah. So this is a verse that if I read his writings, and I believe in how Paul went to the Gentile nations. Paul did not go to those Gentile nations without Moses' teachings or the prophets. He didn't. Even on the last part of his life in Acts the 28th chapter, he even said that he was awake from morning to evening, and everybody who came unto him, he taught them the kingdom out of Moses' teachings and the prophets. In fact, I'm gonna go to that real quick in the book of Acts chapter 28 and verse number I think it's 23. I think it's Acts 28 and 23. Acts 28, 23. And then we'll go back to Romans 15:4. But I want to build upon Romans 15:4, because Paul was writing to those who were born again of Rome. Those who were born again of the Roman Empire. He was writing to them, but what he used as a point of reference to build the doctrine of Christ came from Moses' teachings and the prophets. So in Acts 28 and verse number 23, and when they had appointed him a day, there came many to him into his lodging, to whom he expounded and testified the kingdom of Yah, persuading them concerning Jesus, both out of the law of Moses and out of the prophets, from morning to evening. So what did Paul use to persuade those of Rome and of other, when he went about his missionary journey? This is written, what he used to persuade them concerning Jesus. So if I follow Paul's teaching, and he says, follow me as I follow Christ, my understanding of his teaching is going to lead me back to Moses' teachings and the prophets, because that's how he built the kingdom in Gentile nations. He was teaching them things of the kingdom, but it was coming from what we call Torah. He didn't say Torah here. He said out of the law of Moses and the prophets. And so what he had was he had scrolls that he would use, and he would teach from Moses' teaching. Well, we know that Moses wrote when he's referencing the law of Moses. Moses wrote Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. So he would use Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, and he would use the prophets, the Tanakh, to persuade them about the kingdom and Jesus Christ. So I would be a freshman in my study and in my growth if I'm absent of the knowledge of Moses' teachings and the prophets. In fact, many of us would have a difficult time sitting under Paul's teachings if we did not know Moses' law. He would have to teach it to us. Like he says here, persuading them concerning Jesus, both out of the law of Moses. So I should be able to go to the law of Moses and find what? Find Jesus Christ. I should be able to find Jesus out of the law of Moses. I should be able to find Jesus out of the prophets. That's what Paul used. That was his material. That was his point of reference. And that's how he built. He built them on their faith. When he talked about faith, he would talk about the faith of Christ and the faith in Christ, and he would reference the examples of the people that we have for examples for us um, out of Moses' writings and the prophets. And so we learn about faith stemming from Torah, and then we see faith in action. We actually see faith in action when we look at Jesus, the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth. We actually see faith in action. And so when you see his life does not differ anything from Moses' teachings or the prophets. In fact, he solidifies it. He brings more, he puts more meat on the bones. Um, he fulfills it more. He explains Moses' writings, not only in his teaching when he taught the many parables unto the disciples, but he explained Moses' teachings through the life he lived. We have his life. We see his obedience. It is said of him when he spoke, and he says, I do always those things that please the Father. So we see what pleases the Father. We see that from the teachings of Moses. He taught Moses. He told you exactly what would please him. It was right there in front. And so we see the life of Christ. And so the life of Christ is not separate from the teachings of Moses. And I don't know. I know some people, some people listen. They fall in to the class, and then they hear something. They say, oh well, I've got what I need for today from that class. But one thing about Christ, he would teach all day and up to it was time to go to sleep, and then he would pray almost all night. His ministry was only 3.5 years. I've been here for this is my 8th year, so I've more than doubled his ministry, and the focal point of his whole ministry was his obedience unto his Father. He says, I do always those things that please him. I've never gotten out of the will of my Father. Well, what is the will of the Father? What is the will of the Father? And so in Romans 15:4, back to Romans 15:4, so Paul in his writings to the Romans, he says, for whatsoever things were written aforetime were written for our learning. What was written aforetime was written for our learning, that we through patience means you have to endure. I have to endure, and through comfort of the scriptures. So everything from Genesis to Malachi should bring some comfort. Well, it doesn't bring comfort to everybody, because there's some people who read it and think, oh man, I don't, really, we should not want to be on the wrong side of the Most High of this book. I mean, nobody in their right mind wants to be on his bad side, on the wrong side. When I read in Torah about Israel as a nation and how they fell out of favor with him. And number one, there's several things that fell out of favor with him, but one of the worst things was idolatry. They got caught up in idolatry. They wanted to be like all the other nations. And even today, people have a hard time. They want to be like everybody else. He didn't want his people to be like everybody else. He says, I'm calling you out of a nation. I don't want you to be like that nation that I called you out of, speaking of Egypt, and I don't want you to be like the people in whose land you're going. Talking about all the other people. So he says, I don't want you to be like your past, and don't be looking to these other people as your future. But we have a hard time sometimes, not everybody. I mean, some of us, it's pleasing to the soul. What he teaches us is pleasing to us. We don't have a hard time with it. But for others, it's difficult because we tend to want to see, what's going on the other side of the fence. We get sold on the grass is greener on the other side. I want to be like everybody else. In all honesty, any teacher or preacher will have a hard time getting idols out of the church. In all honesty, because and I know a lot of people say, "Ain't no idols in the church." I know you'd be surprised what an idol is, and how He does not. Our Father in heaven, and Jesus Christ, His only begotten Son, does not fuse or unite with any paganism, none whatsoever. And I know we get, what we have a problem with. What we have a problem with is because we don't see any harm, and we say it's innocent. Paganism, all these other gods and stuff. We feel, well, there ain't no harm in that. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, and so let's look at 1 Samuel. Let's look at 1 Samuel 15, and I want to go down to I want to go down to in 1 Samuel 15. And let's start at verse number 2. Let's look at 1 Samuel 15 and 2. I'm going to start there. And let's. The problem with a lot of us is the problem that King Saul or Melech Shaul had. King Saul, Melech is a king. He was a Malach or Melech. And many of us have the same problem that he had. So it says here in verse number 2, "Thus saith Yah of hosts, I remember that which Amalek did to Israel, how he laid wait for him in the way when he came up from Egypt. Now go and smite Amalek, and utterly destroy all that they have, and spare them not. But slay both man and woman, infant and suckling, ox, sheep, camel, and ass," or donkey. So that was the commandment that was given to Saul. So King Shaul gathered the people together, numbered them. Okay, then now I want to go down to let's go down to verse number 8. 1 Samuel 15:8. "And he took Agag, the king of the Amalekites, alive, and utterly destroyed all the people with the edge of the sword." Now the commandment was to get everything, wipe them all out. But King Shaul decided, I'm going to keep the king alive. Now what else did he do? Now let's look at verse number 9. "But Shaul and the people spared Agag and the best of the sheep and of oxen and of the fatlings and the lambs and all that was good, and would not utterly destroy them. But everything that was vile and refuse, that they destroyed utterly." So here comes the word of Yah unto Samuel, and he says in verse number 11, "It repenteth me that I have set up Shaul king, for he is turned back from following me, and have not performed my commandments." Now the commandments, we read the commandments. This was a commandment. In verse number 3, this was the commandment. "Now go and smite Amalek, and utterly destroy all that they have, and spare them not." but slay both man and woman, infant and suckling, ox, sheep, camel, and ass. That was a commandment. Now, Shaul is going to try to make his case and say, I did keep the commandments, but he did not. He did not keep the commandments. And this is what a lot of church folks have. They have this Shaulitis. I'm make up a word. That comes out of my dictionary. Shaulitis is what they have because, or Saulitis, Shaulitis, because they feel that there's some good things out there that our Father won't mind us holding on to. We don't see no harm in it. We don't see no harm in it. You know, when he told us, I don't want you to have no idols. I don't unite with any pagan gods. That's him. That's our Father in heaven. He said, I ain't putting up with no paganism. I don't care how you dress it up. You can fashion it. You can design it. You can make it look all good and everything. But to him, it's still pagan. Now, to us, we have Saulitis. We think, oh, well, there's really nothing wrong. So listen to what he did. Because the Most High told Samuel, it repenteth me, he have not kept my commandments. And Samuel he cried and he was grieved all night. It said it grieved him and he cried all night because he loved Shaul the king. He loved him. But he had to tell him what the Most High said. And Samuel, verse number 13, and Samuel came to Shaul, and Shaul said unto him, Blessed be thou of Yah, I have performed the commandment of Yah. That's what he said. So Samuel says, well, what meaneth this bleating of the sheep in my ears and the lowing of the oxen which I hear? If you kept his commandment, I wouldn't hear all of this. You know, and now listen to what Shaul, and this is the Saulitis that people have today. And Shaul said, they have brought them from the Amalekites, for the people spared the best of the sheep and of the oxen. Why? To sacrifice unto Yah, thy Elohim. Notice now, he doesn't say Yah is his Elohim. He says Yah, thy Elohim, talking to Samuel. He's your Elohim. And the rest we have utterly destroyed. And so Samuel tells him, well, let me tell you what the Most High Yah, let me tell you what he says. And so he goes on to tell him, when you was little in thine own eyes. But notice what Samuel said, or not Samuel, but Shaul said. For the people spared the best of the sheep and of the oxen to sacrifice unto Yah thy Elohim. In his mind, he felt that I can spare the king and still be okay with the Most High Yah. I can keep the best because we have to sacrifice unto him, so we're going to utterly destroy all the other ones, but we're going to give the best and give unto him. So what does he say? When we go down here where he's, verse number 22, Samuel said, hath Yah great delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices? Because we kept the best to give unto you. So do you think he wants you to delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices or in obeying his voice? Because he says, behold, to obey is better. It was more, he looked at the obedience of King Saul. He looked at his obedience unto his commandment than burnt offerings and sacrifices. And we know how, well, I'm sacrificing so much for him. I sacrifice my time. I sacrifice my money. I sacrifice, I take time from my kids. I take time from my employer, from my school. I sacrifice all of this. But your obedience unto him is better than your sacrifice. That's how he looks at your obedience. So for us to obey Torah, for us to obey his word, is more important and it gives a better aroma unto him and to his throne. Our obedience does over burnt offerings and sacrifices. He says, behold, to obey is better than sacrifice, and to hearken than the fat of rams. And then he says in verse 23, and I'll finish up here and we're going to move on. For rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft, and stubbornness is as iniquity and idolatry. Because thou hast rejected the word of Yah, he hath also rejected thee from being king. So when you don't keep his word, that's like rebellion. When he says, okay, put away all the idols. Well, I think this one is harmless. You know, I don't even want you making mention of other God. Let's look at Exodus 23 and 13. Exodus 23 and 13. He says, and in all things that I have said unto you, be circumspect, and make no mention of the name of other gods, neither let it be heard out of thy mouth. That's a commandment coming from him. But to us, we think it's harmless. Oh, there's nothing wrong with, pagan holidays and stuff. Oh, there's nothing wrong with it. In fact, we represent and we celebrate the pagan holidays along with, holy days of Israel. So what the beast has done to get favor of those who are chosen by him, he just fuses together paganism with holy days. So we try to keep holy days and paganism together, and we think, well, I mean, it's okay because I know it's a holy day, but we're fusing in paganism into it as well. That's how our adversary is. He's very tricky. He's very conniving. He's very clever. He's very slippery. And for a lot of us, we think that there's no harm in some of these other celebrations. Oh, there's no harm in that. That's just a part of the culture. Well, the culture of this land that we're living in is not the culture of the people that he chose. The nation that he chose, which was supposed to be a model and a light unto the world. He says it. You're going to be a light unto the Gentiles. He says all these other nations, they're going to look at. So let's look at Deuteronomy chapter 4 and verse number 6. Deuteronomy 4 and 6. Deuteronomy 4 and 6. Keep therefore and do, for this is your wisdom and your understanding in the sight of what? Nations. So they were going to be example to all these other nations. So keeping his holy days, even today, is an example to all the other nations. But what the adversary has done is kind of fuse together idolatry and paganism into the holy days, so that his people, when they keep the holy days and they bridge it together, they couple it together with paganism, and they say, well, we are celebrating, his death. We are celebrating his birth. We are celebrating that, but they fuse together paganism with it. And so we feel that it's harmless. And that's that Saul-itis that I was talking about. A lot of us got that Saul-itis, Shaul-itis, where what did Shaul, Melech Shaul? We kept the best to offer up. Because in his mind and his understanding, I don't have to fully keep his commandment. I'll just give the best because I know he likes sacrifice and offerings. So I'll give him the best sacrifice offerings. And a lot of people feel that there's things that we do that are pagan. Oh, but it's harmless. I don't think he's going to have a problem with it. I don't think he has a problem with it. I didn't find out till this year. And some people was offended by it, but it is what it is. But I didn't find out till this year that clover, that they represent the three-sided clover, and so now they make it four-sided. But that clover represents the Trinity. It was represent the Trinity, and like the Trinity is supposed to give you good luck. That's what it was for. It's supposed to give you good. All pagan. It's all paganism, but it creeps into Israel and the body of Christ. And what they do is say, oh, he's crazy. That's harmless. There ain't nothing wrong with that. But they don't know the idolatry and the paganism when they bring it into their house, how he hates it. And because he hasn't struck us down with lightning when we practice that paganism, we think we're okay. Well, I'm still here today. He hadn't struck me down with lightning. That's because his mercy, and he's shown forth his mercy. But he says, your understanding in the sight of nations, which shall hear all these statutes and say, surely this great nation is a wise and understanding people. But you have to know that your enemy and your adversary knows this book better than you. And so he will deceive and deflect from the word to make you feel like you have something. It's troubling. It's troubling. Verse 7, for what nation is there so great who hath Elohim so nigh unto them, as Yah, our Elohim, is unto all things that we call upon him? And what nation is there so great that hath statutes and judgments so righteous as all this law which I set before you this day? Okay. And then verse 9, I'll finish up with verse 9. Only take heed to thyself and keep thy soul diligently, lest thou forget the things which thine eyes have seen, unless they depart from thy heart all the days of thy life. But teach them thy sons and thy sons' sons. So there was a parental responsibility for fathers to teach their sons and teach their sons how to teach their sons. And so it went from generation to generation. It was a parental responsibility. And we don't value that today. That's not valued. I shouldn't say in everybody's house, but in some people's homes. When I say things, I'm not talking about you. I'll use what Bishop Boyd said, my first pastor, what he said years ago. I'm not talking about you unless it's you. So when I speak, I'm speaking kind of rhetorically and everything. I'm not isolating anybody, talking about any individual, unless that's you. Now, there's a saying out there that the guilty don't need an accuser, because they know they're guilty, so they don't need an accuser. So I speak rhetorically, but a lot of this is not valued anymore in our homes, to where we don't see our fathers as teachers in the home, and the responsibility of fatherhood, and that's why he said the true religion are those who care for the widows and who else? Fatherless. There is no. You guys. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong. I'm just going to say somebody can correct me if I'm wrong. I have not seen motherless in the script. Motherless. I have seen fatherless over and over again, but I haven't seen motherless. Unless I could be corrected now. You can do a word search and see if there's motherless in the script, but there is fatherless over and over because of the parental responsibility. A child that is not taught by his father is considered what? A bastard. A child that is not taught by the father is considered a bastard. And we don't value that, not like we should. There are some homes where that is valued, and that is the principle and the structure of the home, is because they know that the father's the teacher. But if you look at it in the broad sense, look at it in a macro sense, because you got the macro sense and then you got the micro sense. So microscopically speaking, there are some homes that are like that, but the macro sense of it, you don't have it. What do we do in most homes? Well, let's leave it up to somebody else. We push off the responsibility on somebody else. And it is difficult at best to teach the generation of kids today. Difficult at best to teach them. The only way that you escape some of the difficulty is to get them from the crib and start teaching them from the crib while they're still on their mother's milk, and you teach them and you build those principles in them and you raise them like that. You save yourself a lot of headaches and a lot of sleepless nights if you do it like that. You'll save yourself a lot of sleepless nights. You won't be getting those calls all through the night. You won't have to be worrying about a wayward son, a wayward daughter, and everything if you do it the way the book says. Because they says here, all these other nations are going to say, man, y'all are wise and understanding people. Man, you guys are really, what we need to do is model y'all as a people. But a lot of this we've lost. And the teaching of the sons to their sons, this was a part of the commandment, even in the Holy Shema. Now, we talked about it the other day, the Holy Shema, which is the first and great commandment, which is, Hear, O Yasharah, Yah thy Elohim is one Yah, and thou shalt love him with all thy heart, mind, soul, body, strength. Him only shalt thou serve, and thou shalt teach this unto thy sons while you're what? Walking in the way, while you're, that's when you teach them. You just teach them throughout the day. And while you're in the house, while you're out in the way, you're to teach it. Because what we do is there's no teaching in the house, so we send them off to institutions to teach them. Y'all teach my son. Teach my daughter. Teach my daughter how to be a wife, a woman and a wife. Teach my son how to be a man. Teach them about the Most High. We send them off to do it. No, that's the responsibility. It's right here in our book. I think I read that. But teach them thy sons and thy sons' sons. It's written. It's written in script. So we need to adhere to it. And the Holy Shema, which is Deuteronomy 6 and 4. Deuteronomy 6 and 4. And if you keep reading, one thing I wanted to say, a couple things I wanted to say. I want to say on today, because there's some teaching. Thank you. There's some teaching. Now, my teaching is a little different than what you hear with a lot of people. My teaching is a little different, and then there's the accusation of Judaism. But you have to understand what you're saying when you say Judaism, because if I live my life like my Messiah and I walk in his path and in his steps, then I keep the Sabbath day holy. I keep the holy days. I keep that's what he did. He says, I do always those things that please my Father. So he walked in Torah. So if I'm following him, if he's my master, my Messiah, I'm following him. I'm keeping the ordinances of this book. Judaism is different from that. If you research Judaism is taught from the Talmud. There's a Talmud out there. You have the Babylonian Talmud and you have the Jerusalem Talmud. And that's what the Hasidic Jews and even the nation that calls themselves Israel, but they're Israelis, that's what they keep. They keep Judaism, which is the teachings of the Talmud. Following the Talmud and the teachings of the Talmud puts you in Judaism and Zionism. And if you listen to the Talmud, and I haven't read it, but I've listened to people who have read it, and how they talk about our Messiah and how they talk about his people, that's not our Torah, that's not our book. And the things that you have to keep in order to be in Judaism, it comes from the Talmud. We live our lives according to Torah, not the Talmud, but Torah. And that's what Christ did. He lived his life after the teachings of Torah, not after the Talmud. He even said in Jeremiah chapter 8 and verse number 8, he says, how do ye say we are wise and the law of Yah is with us? Lo, certainly in vain made he the pen of the scribes is in vain. There are writings of the scribes, which is the Talmud, because the Talmud is considered the oral law, or the Talmud was kind of like a commentary to what? Moses' teachings. So according to Moses' teachings now, we're going to give you a commentary on that. And then that becomes the Talmud. You had the Babylonian Talmud and the Jerusalem Talmud, which is not Torah, which is not the teachings of Moses. And the prophet Jeremiah says, that's in vain. Your pen that the scribes use, that's in vain, because we don't need anything written outside of Torah. Anything written outside of Torah is in vain. And there's a lot of commentaries. You go to a seminary, there's a lot of commentaries. In fact, people get called into the ministry, and what do? Or at least what I did. Go get you a whole volume of commentary. I invested money in Matthew Henry commentary, a whole volume from A to Z, going from Genesis to Revelation through the commentary of Matthew Henry. And now that I look back, there's a lot of things I read that was in error of Torah. But if you don't know Torah and Torah's not teaching you, you can't see the error. You really can't see the error of your way. So I want to go to Exodus chapter 3 and verse number 14. Exodus 3 and 14. And I went round and about, but I wanted to go from Romans 15:4 to this one. We know what Romans 15:4 says, right? Those things which are written aforetime was written for our learning, that we through patience and comfort of the scripture might have hope. We might have hope. So the things that were written aforetime, the things that were written by Moses, and we know that, my pencil going to die on me. We know that Apostle Shaul, when they came to him to hear his teaching, he opened up Torah, the teachings of Moses. Or actually, he says in Acts 28:23, what did he say? The law of Moses and the prophets is what he used to persuade them. So if you can't go to the law of Moses and the prophets, you really can't persuade anybody. Or your persuasion is going to be skewed because you're using other material. I shouldn't say you can't persuade nobody. That devil, he's persuaded a lot of folks. He's even taken Torah and persuaded folks with it. So we have to know the whole story of Torah. I have to know all of Torah. I can't get a piece of it and just say, well, this is all I have. All I have is Deuteronomy 6 and 4. I don't need anything else. That's not Torah. I'm going to come back here. Let's go. Can we go real quick to Hebrews 10 and 7? Hebrews 10 and 7. We'll go back to Exodus 3:14. Hebrews 10 and 7, he says, then said I, lo, I come, in the volume of the book it is written of me. So the volume of the book is the whole book. It ain't a piece of it. All I want is Deuteronomy 6 and 4. I'm going to pull that out, and then I'm going to pull Isaiah 53 out, and I'm going to build on that, and I got salvation. No, it's all of the volume of the book. And when you say the volume of the book, it's the whole book. From Bereshit, or the beginning, all the way to the prophet Malachi in the 66th book. But the first translation of the Bible that King James authorized, he didn't do it himself, but he authorized it. But that first version had 80 books, or 80. One of them, there was like 81 or 82, because they even included, there was some books that even included, there was another one that's not in the Apocrypha now, and one of them was Enoch. But they decided they couldn't keep Enoch. Enoch was speaking of things that they could not comprehend, and they said it was not canon. So we ain't going to keep Enoch. It's not canon. But Enoch lived before the flood, and Enoch seen some things that was, they said there's no way he could have seen that. There's no way. But who authenticates his prophecy was in the book of Jude. We say Jude, but it's Judas, or not Judas, it's Judah, but we say Jude. But in the book of Jude, he said, and Enoch prophesied. So he authenticates the writings of Enoch because Enoch was a prophet. But so when you look at the volume of the book, was he in the book of Enoch? Yeah, there's some writings about him in Enoch. There's some writings about him in Judith. There's some writings about him in the Maccabees. There's writings about him in Ezra. There's writing of him in the Wisdom of Solomon. Because all we have is Proverbs and the Ecclesiastics and Song of Solomon. But he had other writings too. It's just that the custodians of the book decided what is canon and what not is canon. But in the original writing with the King James, there was like 81, 82 different books in there. They slimmed it down to 80, and then they slimmed it down to 66. But he's in all of that. You mean he's in more than 66 books? Yeah, he's in more than 66 books. But this is what we have to build on, and we have enough to build on this. But he says in the volume of the book, that's how we'll know if he's doing the will of his Father. I'm not going to know if he's doing the will of his Father if I only got one verse. I got Isaiah 53. That's all I got. Well, there's more to it than that. There's more to it. That's a part of it. And we ought to be thankful that he gave his only begotten Son for us to redeem us and to get us back into covenant with him. Because and we're going to look at some of that today because we're going to look at covenant. But let's go to Exodus 3 and 14 because we have to look at the reestablishment of covenant. So 3:14, and Elohim said unto Moshe, I am that I am. And he said, thus shalt thou say unto the children of Yasharal, I am hath sent me unto you. Now, a couple things, and we know, some of us know what the previous verse is talking about because when the Most High sent Moses unto his people. And why do you think Moshe was kind of troubled by going back to his people in Egypt? Yes. Right. And it wasn't like his people had his back. Because the reason why he ran is because he thought his people was going to turn him in. Man, you gonna turn me over to the Egyptians after I kill the Egyptians? I'm getting out of here. So he had a lot of suspicion towards his people for his own livelihood, and also he, I think Moshe was somewhat frightened of his people. I think he was somewhat apprehensive of going back because of the type of, going back to the hood, going back to these folks. I know these folks. I know the character of these folks. So you're going to have to help me. You're going to have to help me. So who should I say sent me? Because they're going to ask me. I know these people. Notice what he says in verse 13. And Moshe said unto Elohim, behold, when I come unto the children of Yasharal, and shall say unto them, Elohim of your fathers have sent me unto you. He knew his people. And they shall say to me, what is his name? They're going to say, who is he? Who is that? I mean, what is his name? And what shall I say unto them? Because Moshe knew those people. He came from those people. He knew those people. He knew the trouble that he was going to run into by going back into Egypt, going back into amongst the Hebrews and the Israelites. He knew what he was facing. And he says, I got to have some backing. I got to have some support. I can't just walk up in there saying, come on, let's get up out of here. Let's get out of that captivity. He says, what is thy name? What shall I say unto them when they ask me that? So Elohim said unto Moshe, I am that I am. And he said, and this ain't Moshe that's saying it, thus shalt thou say unto the children of Yasharah, I am, have sent me unto you. So we, I want to go to the Hebrew text here and kind of break some of this up, because this comes back even in the time of our Messiah, because in the time of our Messiah, he did not speak English, he did not speak Latin, he did not speak Greek, he spoke Hebrew, and he said some of the same things that his father had said, and that's why they wanted to stone him. He says before Abraham was. We say I am in English, but he says before Abraham, and he speaks something that caught the people to where they wanted to kill him. They wanted to kill him because he says, you're a man and you're making yourself what? An Elohim. You're making yourself Elohim. You're just a man, because what he said. So let's look at what he said here. Going to the Hebrew text, and it says, now, what he says unto them, I am. Now, that's H 1961. What's that? Yeah, and it's actually one. So, which I'm not going to say everything now. I'm going to try to build up to it. But yeah, we say I am, but look, now notice this. This is H 1961. So I'm going to pull that up in the Ancient Hebrew Lexicon Bible. It's number 1097-M and V. Again, whenever you go into the Ancient Hebrew Lexicon Bible, the first thing they give you is a root word. This is the root word because after this root word, they add other characters, what we would call letters, but other characters that gives it a little bit different pronunciation and meaning. So the root word is, so what do you do when you breathe? You're just breathing. So the root word of what he's saying here is to breathe. It's actually the breath. The breath. So the root word means breathe, breath, exists. And you look at the characters. You've got the Haid character, Haid, which is in the ancient pictograph Hebrew. It looks like a stick man with his hands up. And that's what it looks like. It looks like this, I give up. But see, in the modern Hebrew, they change the figure, because you have the pictograph Hebrew, you have the Paleo Hebrew, and then you have the modern Hebrew. And then even after the modern Hebrew, you have the Masoretic Hebrew, because they come in with the modern Hebrew, which was already written, and they come in and they add vowel points to modern Hebrew to give the pronunciation in their perspective. So actually, they changed the pronunciation of some words. And what they say in the Masoretic text, they said, well, we did that to make it easier to pronounce. I don't need you to make anything easier for it to pronounce. I don't need that, because what they did is they actually changed some of the words, and we'll see some of that, because the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet is the Aleph, and it's pronounced Ah. But you'll see it in certain writings where they put the Aleph, they don't pronounce it Ah, they pronounce it L. Well, why do you pronounce it L? Well, that's because of the Masoretic text. We want to make it easier for pronunciation. That's why they put those vowel points in there. I don't need any easier. If it's Aleph and it's pronounced Ah, why do you want to tell me it's L? Because they don't want you calling them. They want it changed because they know the power of it. It's that we don't know. And if you don't know the power of something, you don't know. because our whole walk with him is on what I believe. It has to be through belief, because if I don't believe, I'm an unbeliever. And that's why the whole nation of Israel couldn't even go into the promised land, was simply because of unbelief. If you don't believe in the power of his name, of the breath of life, if you don't believe in the power of it, it's not going to mean anything to you. It's not going to mean anything. So the root word is, and like I said the other day, and it wasn't to be comical, but just to kind of let everybody, when you breathe, we don't realize, and that's why he says, let everything that have breath, is to praise him, because when you breathe, you mean all them criminals and all those murders and all those homosexuals and transgenders and all those evil people that hate, all the haters, and they all have breath, and when they breathe, they're praising him? Yeah, once we see where it comes from. So everything that has breath has to praise him. But he's not looking for praisers. Jesus said his Father is looking for true worshipers. That's going to worship him in spirit and in truth. Because everybody can praise him. When you breathe, you're praising him. Just that, that's the breath. So it's M and V. So I have to go down here to M, because what they do is they try to show you what does it mean in this context that it's being used. So in this context that it's being used, they add the yod. So you have yeah. You have the hey, the yod, and the hey. So you have ya. So what does it mean here? Now M V. So the hey character, the yod character, the hey character, when you put it together, it means to exist. So what he's saying is, I exist. I exist. Nobody made me. I was not created. I have no beginning. I ain't got no end. I just exist. I am. I exist. So it says to exist or have breath, because everything that exists has breath, except, and we'll get into some other things here, because I can see inanimate objects around here that exist, but they don't have breath. Okay, so keep that in mind. All right. That which exists has breath. Now, in the Hebrew thought, the breath is the character of someone or something, just as a man has character. So in the Hebrew definition and how they understood it, which is important because this is who it was given to. He did not tell Pharaoh, who was a Hamite, he did not tell Pharaoh, Haya. He did not tell Pharaoh that. He did not tell the Canaanites that. He did not tell any other nations that were around, because there was other nations at this time. He did not tell those other nations who he was. He specifically told Moshe to tell Israel. So it was given to a specific people. So that's why it's important to get an understanding of how they perceived, because that's who it was given to. Why is all of my study and everything that I have to study, when I want to go into a deep study, why do I have to go to Rome? Why do I have to go to Alexandria? Why do I have to go to Greece? Why is our pursuit on knowledge always takes us, where it all, and people are so proud of it. I'm Alpha Theta Pi. I mean, they're so proud. I'm Gamma Sigma. They're so proud. Why does all my research into knowledge and understanding takes me to the Greeks who got it from Alexandria? Egypt. They got it from Egyptians. They got it from the Pharaohs. They got it from Hamites. But I don't go to the Hamites because whenever I do a trace in language and even of this book. So you got this book that was translated from the Latin, which represents Rome, and then they translated it from the Greeks, which represented the third beast, that Greek empire. And then you go back to the Hebrew. You have to actually go back from English to Latin to Greek to Hebrew to get a ruditary, is that the right word? To get a ruditary understanding. Did I say that right? No, a ruditary, back to the roots and yeah, the origin. In order to get to the ruditary or to the origin of it, I have to go from English to Latin to Greek to Hebrew. That's where I need to get my understanding, but I have to go through all these different gates to get there. And you have a lot of people that, they idolize the English language, and that's all they know. And so their perspective of this is through the English dialect and the English culture in the church. I might get some people offended, but even in the church, our ruditary understanding does not go back to the ancient Hebrew and the ancient scripts. It simply stays in English. And you have a lot of people that will contend with you in the English language and how they can build doctrine out of the English language. And everybody that they're reading about, not anybody that they're reading about, spoke English. Was that a double negative? You're reading about people who didn't even know your culture nor your language. But you want to study them in your language and in your culture. Yes.
But it sounds like because the Most High tells Moses to go to the children of Israel and tell them that the God of their forefathers sent him, that they didn't even know.
Yeah.
Because if the oracles are supposed to be passed down from the father to the son, and now Moses is having to go back to these people and say, I am the God of your forefathers, they don't even know.
And so, because we're going to go back to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I mean, that's kind of ahead. I'm just, what I was trying to build here is the fact that the Hebrew thought, what they thought of I am, what they thought of it. Now, why is that important? And that's what I'm trying to build, is why is it important that we listen to the Hebrew thought? Why is it important that we listen to the Hebrew thought? And the reason why it's important is because that's who he gave it to. He gave it to them. He didn't give it to King James. Don't make King James King Jesus. He didn't give it to King James. King James gave the authority to get the translation from Eusebius or Jerome. Now, who's Eusebius or Jerome? He's the one that took the Greek Septuagint and the Greek letters and translated it to Latin. It was Eusebius that did that in like the 3rd or 4th century. He did it. And so you had the Latin Vulgate and the Greek Septuagint from the time of our Messiah to the birth of the church all the way up to the 17th century. You had nothing but the Greek Septuagint and the Latin Vulgate. And as I was studying that, I was trying to think, well, what did they teach the people and the church if you didn't know Latin or Greek? How did they know? What was their reference point? Because if anybody studies the Latin Vulgate, you could not copy the Latin Vulgate. It was not permitted to copy the Latin Vulgate. So where did you go to get the teaching of the reference of this book? Where did you go to get the teachings of Eusebius or Jerome? Well, you had to go to the Roman Catholic Church. That was the ones who taught the Latin Vulgate. You couldn't teach it. That's why it was so important for the fathers to teach the sons how to teach their sons. Because if it's done the way he told his people to do it, it would never be forgotten. I don't have to go to Rome to get it, because it's something that was given, handed down from generation to generation. He knew how important it was for parental responsibility to teach the sons. He knew that. It's just that people stopped believing that. Israel lost faith. They stopped believing. They stopped doing what he told them to do. And so they had to resort to others. And Israel, even in the time of their captivity in Egypt, they resorted to all of those gods, all of that paganism. Because as soon as Moshe went on his third or fourth ascent up into the mountains, they told Aaron, up, make us a god. And we're going to say, this is the God that brought us out of Egypt. In less than 40 days. Because they, like you said, their responsibility, there was a parental responsibility of the fathers to teach the sons. And that was to carry on even after Christ. Fathers are supposed to teach the sons to where it would never been lost. I don't have to go to the Roman Catholic Church if it was taught to me properly by my father. And I'm speaking generally. I mean, that's how it was supposed to be. Why run off to Catholicism? Why run off to seminaries to get teachings through the Latin Vulgate and the Roman Catholic Church? Because if you go to the seminary, you're going to the Roman Catholic Church, and they're teaching you the commentary of this book. If it's done the right way, I would go to my father. My father would teach me. And it would go down from generation to generation like that. But that's how we got off. So in the Hebrew thought, it's important because the way they understood it, and where did they get it from? Where did Moshe get this from? Well, he got it from the Most High. So his understanding of it was he's breathing, and that breath represents his character. This is the character of him. And so when he breathes, and his very breath, he's explaining to me who he is, and I recognize it. I recognize his breath through his character. I recognize that his character is his breath. So it works hand in hand. So what is the character? Look at this H 1961, right? I am. H 1961. He has no beginning and he has no end. He's the very breath. His spirit is everywhere. Everywhere present. Everywhere present is his spirit. We breathe it in, and then we. So when people say, they're actually breathing and saying a part of his name. Just by saying, you're saying a part of his name. It's the very breath. We don't realize that our very breath is a part of his name. And now I heard, I don't believe this because the English language wasn't around, but I did hear somebody say that even our face, if you look at our face and we have just the way our forehead is and our two eyes and then our nose and our mouth, it's a Y. For Yah, it's a Y. That's what I heard. Now I don't believe it because English wasn't. I mean, he didn't speak English, so it wasn't the English language. So we say Y in English, but in the Hebrew, it's the Yod character, and the Yod character. If you know what the Yod is, I wish I had it. Well, it's in here. The Yod character looks like the arm coming down from heaven. Yeah, right there. That's the Yod character. So you got the what we call an H. It's HY, or his name is the Y, or the arm coming down. The H with the hands up, and then you have the ooh character, which I gotta find that, and then you have the another stick person with his hand coming up like that. That's in the pictograph Hebrew. So it looks like an arm coming down from heaven to do what? Save or rescue man. That's how they pictured it. When they said his name, it was like an arm coming down from heaven and saving a man or pulling a man or drawing a man. And the man has his hands up. And that's where they get, a lot of times in policing, what do they tell you? Hands up. Oh, when they tell people you're under arrest, hands up. And what do? They put their hands up. So it's a type of being arrested or being being apprehended. So he wants to apprehend you. He wants to arrest you. He wants to apprehend you. He wants to bring you in. But we don't say arrest or apprehend. We say salvation or rescue. His arm's going to come and rescue. And that's why he said in the prophet Isaiah, he says, my arm is not too short to where it can't save you. Because my arm is long enough to come down to save you. Nor is his ear heavy that he can't hear. So you look at that H 1961. So everywhere where we see H 1961, we're dealing with his breath. We're dealing with his, and what that means is character in the Hebrew context. When he breathes, he's breathing his character. He's telling you who he is. So let's look at something then. Let's go back to the beginning. Let's go to Genesis. Let's look at Genesis 2 and 7. Let's look at Genesis 2 and 7. And Yah Elohim formed man of the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. Now, let's go into the Hebrew text and see what we discover. So in the Hebrew text, and we start to look at all these numbers, do we see 1961? Oh, there it is. 1961. So what is 1961 again? So when it says, upon receiving the breath of the Most High, what happened to man? He became a living soul, but that becoming was breath or existence or life. He began to exist, and he existed with that breath. And what does that breath mean in the Hebrew character or Hebrew understanding? Yeah, it's I am, but what is that breath? What does that mean? To exist. It means to exist. But how do we know you're existing? How do we know he exists? I mean, we're breathing. We know he exists. But remember what the Hebrew thought was? What was the Hebrew thought of breath? It was the character. It's what made him. So when it says here, he breathed the breath of life and man began to exist, man had character. He had character. Okay, look at 1961. It's the same word that we use in Exodus 3:14. So we go down here, and here it is, to exist or have breath. That which exists has breath. In the Hebrew thought, the breath is the character of someone or something. Now, just as a man has character, so do objects. So man has character through the breath that he breathes, but what separates man or the existence of man from inanimate objects that has character? What's the character of this right here that I have in front of me? It's an inanimate object. It's called a table. The character of a table is you can set things on it. You can set things on it. It holds things. That's its function. That's its character. A chair. What's the character of a chair? Well, you sit down on it. The chair is made for us to sit down. And when we sit, we relax. We take weight off of our feet. So there's a lot of functions or character of a chair. I don't confuse a chair with a table, even though some people like to sit on a table. And we have to tell them, that's not the character of that. You can't sit on the table. Sit where? On a chair. Because that's the characteristic of a chair. So inanimate objects has character too. But what separates us from an inanimate object? We have the breath of life. And our character now is modeled after what? What's our character modeled after? Yes, because we're what? Made in his image. So now my character is different from inanimate objects because my character has in it or the breath, and I'm modeled after my Father in heaven. He says, I'm going to create them in our image, in our likeness. And so my character is after the Most High. And so when he made Adam, he made him after his character. So Adam was made in the character or the image of the Most High. He was made eternal because the Most High is the breath, the air that we breathe. He has no beginning or no end. He exists. I just exist. And I have breath. So he made Adam in his image. In his likeness, he made Adam. So being made in his image, he was made to live forever. There was not to be any death in Adam. Adam was not made to die because he was made in the image or the character of the Most High. Now, you can go to Genesis 1, 26 and 27. I think it's 27 or 26. And it talks about let us, and in our image and our likeness. And some people say, well, that's him talking to Mary. But how could he be talking to Mary if Mary didn't exist? If Mary was actually in the image of him, how could he be talking to Mary, who was actually created in his image before, so what he's saying is when he says in our image and in our likeness, he was not dealing with mankind. He was not dealing with Adam because Adam hadn't been created yet. Adam had not been created, so he's not talking about Adam, and Mary came from Adam. The problem that we have a lot of times is we can't see, and there's a lot of things that Enoch had said about the heavens and about the angels, and we can't, it's difficult for people in the church to comprehend some of the things that Enoch had talked about when he talked about the angels. There was a creation that was on this earth before Adam. Adam was his first creation after the earth was made void and without form. Yeah. So the earth was without form and void. But there's something that happened from in the beginning when he created the heavens and the earth to the earth was without form and void, because he didn't make it like that. So there was something that had happened in between Genesis 1:1 and Genesis 1:2. But it's difficult for us to comprehend these angels and these beings that existed before Adam. We have a hard time with it because we're taught through dogma, we're taught that Adam was his first creation. And Adam was not his first creation. It was his first creation from the earth, if you want to use it in that sense. but we have to define it in the right terms, that Adam was his first creation from the earth. But Adam was not his first creation because he had all kind of beings and angels, created beings. And when he created those beings, he created them to live forever. All of the angelic beings, you cannot kill an angel. You can't kill an angel. That's why he even tells us in Hebrews, you got to be careful when you entertain angels or entertain strangers, because you could be entertaining an angel unaware. You don't even know it. And you can't kill an angel, because for them to be in that realm, they have eternal life. That's why he said he made a place for the fallen angels to where the fire never goes out. Let's go to, just to prove this point, because I'm going to come back. I don't want to go too far off base. But in Matthew 25, and I think it's verse number 41, Matthew 25:41, and Jesus is saying, then shall he say also unto them on the left hand, depart from me, ye cursed, into everlasting fire, prepared for the devil and his angels, because he had to make a place for them where the fire does not go out. Why? Because they're eternal beings. He made angels. When he made those angels, when he made the serpent, dragon, devil, Satan, call him what you want, when he made him and Michael and Gabriel and all the others, they were created beings. They were not created to die. They're not created to die. So when they fell, he had to prepare a place for them to where the fire doesn't go out. He did not make the lake of fire for man, for mankind. He did not make it for mankind. But what does it say in Isaiah chapter 5? He says, hell hath enlarged itself, because hell was specifically made for the devil and his fallen angels. But he had to enlarge it because of man. So we see what happened with Adam. What happened with Adam, and I'm going back to 2 and 7. What happened with him was he made him to live forever. He made him to live forever. But what cut him off to where he became mortal was because of sin. And so sin or transgression took an immortal being into mortality, to where now Adam was going to die because of his disobedience. And then upon that, he goes on to say that he had to enlarge hell, because actually hell was not made for Adam, but he actually had to enlarge it. But do you know that Adam is still on earth today? Adam is still here. He's on earth today. And Adam will always be around. Well, how can you say that? Who's Adam? Who's Adam? We are. We are Adam. We are Adam. That's who we are. We are of that seed. We are not of angelic seed. Those who were of angelic seed, all of them was wiped off the earth. He had to get them off the earth. And the only 8 that survived was Noah, his wife, and his 3 sons and their wives. And they were perfect in their generation. And that's not talking about did he do anything wrong or did anything evil. He was perfect in his generation because he had not mixed. There was no mixture of that angelic seed inside man. I know it's hard for a lot of people in church to understand that, but that he cleansed the whole earth. He wiped all the earth off, and the only ones that were left over was Noah, who was perfect in his generation, and he passed that seed down to Shem, Ham, and Japheth. He passed that seed down to them, and so now all of us come through Shem, Ham, or Japheth up through Noah and all the way back to Adam. So Adam is still here today. So when he says in because Jesus says this also, and it says it in Psalms, and I'm trying to catch that verse where it says it in Psalms. I think is it Psalms 87? Is that it? where he says, ye are, no, Psalms 87. Ye are gods. 82 and 6. Okay, Psalms 82 and 6. Psalms 82 and 6. I have said, ye are gods, and all of you are children of the Most High. Now, why is everybody a child of the Most High? Again, is because they come through Adam. We are the Adam. We are Adam that's on earth today. And just like Adam was a son of the Most High, then so are we. And when it says gods here, and we got gods with a little g, one thing that they don't have in the Hebrew text, they don't have capitals, they don't have punctuation, they don't have that in the Hebrew text. And so when we go to the English text, they use certain words, and then we use certain capitalization and certain instruments when in the Hebrew text. Like his name is in the Hebrew text. It's throughout the Hebrew text. And they were to call on his name. But when the Masoretes got it, they said his name is sacred and you're not allowed to utter it. and nobody was allowed to utter it. Huh? Yeah. Not only did they knew the power of it, but they knew the power of it through his people. Because a lot of people can call on his name and nothing will happen. But when his people call on his name, then there's power and there's results. And they knew that, so they wanted to just, nobody call on him. Because we don't know where his seed going to be. So nobody calls on him. Because at the time where the Masoretes got into the text and they put the vowel points in there, Israel had already been scattered. Because that came out, the Masoretic text came out in 300, 400, somewhere around there. Somebody can look it up, but it's around there when they had the Masoretic text. And so they said that you cannot call on his name when his name is in the Hebrew text. Now, when you get to the Greek text, the name is taken out. When you get to the Latin, they insert dunamis. That's because that's the Latin gods. And then when you get to English, you got G-O-D or you got uppercase L-O-R-D. But neither one of those is his name. Neither one of those is his name. So when he says, ye are gods, being fashioned after Adam and being a child of Adam, when Adam was made, he was made eternal. He was made immortal. It wasn't until transgression to where mortality set in. So if you want to call yourself a god, you can. You got Charlemagne the god, but he's still mortal and he's going to die. But he is of the seed of Adam, which was made eternal in its origin. When Adam was made eternal, when Adam was made, he was made in the image and the likeness, and he was made eternal, or he was made immortal. It wasn't until transgression to where Adam went from immortality to mortality. He actually became a mortal being. But you can still call yourself, and that's why a lot of people call themselves a god. And you got demigods today. But you're not Elohim, and there's a difference between Els or gods and Elohim. Because Elohim means I'm the supreme. I'm the top one. You can't go above me. There's a difference when you say Elohim from if you hear me say God, oh, there's God or there's a God. What kind of God you talking about? Because God, you just say God. But in the Hebrew text, you can say Al or Els, or you'll say Elohim. Well, when I say Elohim, I'm talking about the supreme one. But in English, they'll put capital G, capital O, capital D. But in the Hebrew text, they'll say Elohim. And they'll say his name in the Hebrew text, which you don't see in the Greek or the Latin or the English. They purposely did not. Now, they did insert his name in here in certain spots. in certain places, they inserted his name. Let me show you one. Let me show you one place where they inserted, and this is not the only place, but Psalms 83 and 18, that men may know that thou, whose name alone, and there's no J and there's no V, so it's not Jehovah, but his name alone, Yahuwah, are the most high over all the earth. And he tells you what his name is. This is my name. And then you can go to, what is it, Isaiah 43, is it? He gives them his name. Was it 43? There's a, I thought it was 43, maybe not. But there's another place where he gives them his name. What is it? Exodus.
What's the words of it?
Psalms 93? Is that where it is? Okay. Because there was a couple places where 93 and what? No, I'm looking for where they actually put it as Jehovah. I know it's Psalms 83, 18. That's one place, but there was another place where they actually was it Exodus 6? Yeah, Exodus 6 and 3. That was the other place I was looking for. Exodus 6 and 3, where he tells them, "I appeared unto Abraham, unto Yishak, and unto Jacob by the name of Elohim El Shaddai. But by my name, Yahuwah, was I not known to them." But they actually put in, and they pronounce it what? Jehovah. So there's a mispronunciation of his name. Because in another place, real quick, if you just bear with me, Psalm 68 and verse number 4, he rides in the heavens by his name Yah. His name Yah. So there's certain places where they inserted his name, and I don't know if they did it accidentally or what, but they actually inserted his name instead of uppercase L, uppercase O, uppercase R, uppercase D. And I find it tragic that the church is either offended or they're afraid of his name. That should never be. Anybody that's naming the name of Christ and they depart from iniquity should not be offended by his name. They should not. And I think this is just my personal opinion. This is my personal opinion. But I think the reason why it's offensive and they don't really know it and don't want to know it is it's something that they're going to have to know at the end. And at the end, it's something that they're going to have to know. And we're approaching the end time now, and I think that's probably why that people in the church is offended by the name Yah. Yes.
We don't like foreign things. We might say we do, but in general we don't. We want to be this is right. This is right. Anything culture might sound different, might not be an English word. We frown down upon it.
Yeah. And we're taught that, his name is Lord. His name is God. That's what I was taught. I was taught that. I didn't find out his name until I did my research, because the church didn't tell me his name. And I mean, I'm not trying. I don't want to offend anybody. I don't want anybody to lose faith. but he's given us the salvation name. We have to look at what salvation is, and he gave us the salvation name. But we can't be offended by the Father's name. That should not offend us. But it does. A lot of people, they don't want to know anything else. I don't want to know anything else, and it's because what's been taught us. Every person is the product of your teaching. Everybody. Everybody. I don't care where you go. You didn't get it by no revelation. Don't talk about, I got this by, no, you didn't. You got it by teaching. We get everything we know by teaching. Very little that you know comes by revelation. Very little. Because I grew up, I've been around here all my life. It wasn't until recently I got revelation. Just recently I got revelation. So when people say, well, all I know is Jesus, and that's all I want to know, that's the only name I'm called on, and that's the only name for salvation, that's all I want to know. You didn't get that from revelation. That was taught to you. That was taught to us. And so we are all products of our teaching. It takes revelation to go up to a higher level. Everybody doesn't get revelation. You don't have to have revelation for salvation, especially when you understand what salvation is. You don't have to have revelation for salvation, but you have to have revelation to know who he is. That comes through revelation, because he doesn't reveal himself to everybody. We just read that, right? In let's look at this real quick. Exodus 6:3. He says, I appeared unto Abraham, unto Yishak, and unto Jacob by Shaddai. By Shaddai is what he appeared unto me. Now we say El Shaddai, but the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet is not El, it's Al. So Al Shaddai is what he appeared unto Abraham, Yishak, and Jacob. But he said, but by my name, his specific name now, Yah, by my name, was I not known to them. So he's introducing himself to Moshe. And remember now, names mean something. Yes. Yeah, that's an italic. Yeah. For simplification, he says, I was not known by Al Shaddai. I was not known by Al Shaddai, or I was. Okay, I appeared unto Abraham, unto Yishak, and unto Jacob by Al Shaddai. That's what it says in the Hebrew text. But by my Shem, which is name, by my Shem, Yahuwah, was I not known unto them. So when you look at this in the Hebrew text, and you go to Yah, or you look at its 4 letters, it's the Yod, He, U, He. 4 letters is the Yod, A, U, He. And for Yod, A, U, He, which is his name, what do they put for his name in this verse? But what do they normally put? Okay, yeah. So how could you substitute Lord when this is his name? His name is Yod, He, U, He. Yod, He, U, He. Yahuwah. That's his name. And when you're saying it, you're kind of breathing. You're breathing his name. Yahuwah. Because the root of this is or Haya. Remember, we looked at H1961, which is Haya. H1961, which is Haya. But here, H3068, you have his Yod, He, U, He, and that's his name. There is no J, so it's not no hard sound J. Huh? Or no V. You don't have no J or no V. And you know where that V comes from? That V comes from the Latin Vulgate. And that's why you see a lot of V. And I noticed in Maricopa County in Arizona, if you go to their government building, and it says the county of, or no, it says the courthouse of Maricopa County. Now listen to what I said. The courthouse of Maricopa County. In court, do you have a U in court? Yeah, you have a U in court. But if you look at that insignia on their building, it's a V. And house, is there a U in house? There is a U, but they have a V in place of the U. So where it says county, courthouse of Maricopa County, all the U's, they have V's. And so you can go to other municipalities where you see county, courthouse, and you'll see V's. Where does the V come from? Because you pronounce it, you don't pronounce it with a V, but that V comes from Latin. So it comes from Latin. So even in the 1611 King James Bible that I have, where you have the U, they have V's. And they get that V from the Latin Vulgate. But it's not V. You don't have that hard V sound like in Vivian, or you don't have that V sound. You have a courthouse. It's a softer sound. County, it's a softer sound. But if you look at it in text, it's a V. But when you pronounce it, it's a softer sound. So when we look at Jehovah, you see a V there, but it's actually a ooh. It's a softer sound. It's not a V sound. So, and even the J, it's not a hard sound, it's a softer sound. Yah. So you have Yahuwah. Yahuwah. And that's his name, Yahuwah. Now, let's go to one of our first verses where I wanted to start from the beginning. Exodus 3:14. This I am, he actually says, Haya, Asher, Haya, is what he actually says in the Hebrew text. Haya, Asher, Haya. I am that I am. That I am is his character. It's his character. That's who he is. So what is his character? What is the character of our Father, the Most High, the Elohim, Yah, in the Shamayim? What is his character? So we want to look at his character, because he had to reintroduce himself to Moshe and the children of Israel. He had to reintroduce himself. So in this reintroduction of who he is, and he tells them, I'm going to be, or my behavior, my character is going to be what you're going to need to know, and in order for them to be not only rescued or delivered or redeemed or whatever. If you don't know who he is, you're not going to be able to understand him. And I got to be careful, because I was getting ready to say, you're not going to be redeemed if you don't know who he is. Because in the hour that is approaching us, if you don't know who he is, you're going to have a very hard time. You're going to have a very hard time. So let's look at the character of him. Let's look at his character, because that's how the Hebrews understood it. This is his character. So let's go to Genesis. Remember now, he declared the end from the beginning, right? So we have to go back to the beginning. Let's look at his character in Genesis 17. Let me go there first. Genesis 17, and let's look at verse number 7. Genesis 17 and 7. And what we're going to see is his character. Okay? I will establish what? I will establish my covenant between me and thee and thy seed after thee in their generations for a what? Everlasting covenant, to be a Elohim unto them, unto thee, and to thy seed after thee. So the character of Yah, what is, and we're not going to cover all of his character today because there's some other characters, but this is how he introduced himself to Abraham or Abram at first. How did he introduce himself to Abram at first? To Abraham?
Did he speak from heaven?
Okay. Let's look at it. Let's look at it again. Okay, let's look at it again. Let's go up to let's go because we're not going to be able to cover all his character. Remember now, when you breathe, or how the Hebrews understood it, they understood Yah, they understood that as being character. This is who he is. He exists in his character. He exists in the very breath that he breathes. And so we have to look at who he is. What is his character? And he explains his character throughout the volume of the book. It is explained. But he introduces himself to Abraham, or actually Abram. He introduces himself, and the way he introduces himself is through something that is all throughout this book. So let's just see it, and then I'll ask you again. Okay? Verse number 1, 17 and 1, and we're just going to read down. I'm going to read this, and then we're going to read down. Then we're going to go to 15, and then we'll read that, and then I'm going to come back, and then I'll ask again. And when Abram was 90 years old and 9, Yah appeared to Abram and said unto him, I am Al Shaddai, Elohim. Okay, remember now, we read in Exodus that he knew him as Al Shaddai, or El Shaddai, Al Shaddai. Walk before me and be thou perfect. And when we didn't look it up, and you can look it up in your own time, but Al Shaddai means he nurtured him. It was like a nurturing mother. If you want to look at women who have babies and then they begin to nurture their babies, that's what Al Shaddai means. It means to nurture you, okay? Walk before me, be thou perfect. And I will make my covenant between me and thee, and will multiply thee exceedingly. And Abram fell on his face, and Elohim talked with him, saying, As for me, behold, my covenant is with thee, and thou shalt be a father of many nations. Neither shall thy name any more be called Abram, but thy name shall be Abraham, for a father of many nations have I made thee. And I will make thee exceeding fruitful, and I will make nations of thee, and kings shall come out of thee. And I will establish my covenant between me and thee and thy seed after thee in their generations for an everlasting covenant, to be Elohim unto thee and to thy seed after thee. Okay? Now, let's go to Genesis 15. Genesis 15, and let's start with let's start with 5. And he brought him forth abroad and said, Look now toward heaven and tell the stars if thou be able to number them. And he said unto him, So shall thy seed be. And he believed in Yah, and he counted it him for righteousness. Okay? So, and he said unto him, I am Yah that brought thee out of Ur of the Chaldees to give thee this land to inherit it. Now, let's go down. Let's go down to I missed it's right there in verse 8. Verse 8. Let's look at verse 8. And he said, Adon Yah. Now he's asking him. This is Abraham Abram, asking him, what does Abram say? Whereby shall I know that I shall inherit it? Listen to the question. Whereby shall I know that I shall inherit it? So he's getting ready to give him the answer. And he said unto him, take me a heifer of 3 years old, and a she-goat of 3 years old, and a ram of 3 years old, and a turtle dove, and a young pigeon. And he took unto him all these, and divided them in the midst, and laid each piece one against another, but the birds divided he not. And when the fowls came down upon the carcass, Abram drove them away. And when the sun was going down, a deep sleep fell upon Abram, and lo, a horror of great darkness fell upon him. And he said unto Abram, know of a surety that thy seed shall be a stranger in a land not theirs, and shall serve them, and they shall afflict them 400 years. And also that nation whom they shall serve will I judge, and afterward shall they come out with great substance. And thou shalt go to thy fathers in peace. Thou shalt be buried in a good old age, but in the fourth generation they shall come hither again, for the iniquity of the Amorites not yet full. Now listen to this. And it came to pass that when the sun went down and it was dark, behold, a smoking furnace and a burning lamp that passed between those pieces. Okay? In the same day, Yah made a covenant with Abram, saying, unto thy seed have I given this land, from the river Euphrates, the river of Egypt, unto the great river, the river Euphrates. Okay, so we read in Genesis 15, Genesis 17, right? Okay, let's go to Genesis 17 and 19. So far, what have we learned so far? Well, he's dealt with Abram and Abraham. Okay, we're trying to build character now. Okay, now let's go to Genesis 17, 19. And Elohim said, Sarah, thy wife, shall bear thee a son indeed, and thou shalt call his name Yishak. And I will establish my covenant with him for an everlasting covenant, and with his seed after him. Okay. Let's go down verse 21. But my covenant will I establish with Yishak, and Sarah shall bear unto thee at this time, set time in the next year. All right. Now, I'm not done. Let's go to 1 Chronicles 16 and let's look at 15 first. Let's look at 15. Be ye mindful always of his covenant, the word which he commanded to 1,000 generations, even the covenant which he made with Abraham, and of his oath unto Yishak, and have confirmed the same to Jacob for a law, to Yasharah for everlasting covenant. Okay? Let's go to Psalms 105. Look at verse number 8. He hath remembered his covenant forever, the word which he commanded to 1,000 generations, which covenant he made with Abraham, and his oath unto Yishak, and confirmed the same unto Jacob for a law, to Yasharah for everlasting covenant. Okay, let's not get fatigued. Don't get fatigued. Let's go to the 24th chapter of Exodus, 24th chapter of Exodus, and let's start at verse number 5. 24th chapter of Exodus, verse number 5. And he sent young men of the children of Yasharal, which offered burnt offerings and sacrificed peace offerings of oxen unto Yah. And Moses took half of the blood and put it in basins, and half of the blood he sprinkled on the altar. And he took the book of the covenant and read in the audience of the people, and they said, all that Yah have said will we do, and be obedient. And Moshe took the blood and sprinkled it on the people and said, behold the blood of the covenant which Yah hath made with you concerning all these words. Okay? And then it says they seen Elohim, and they saw, and this is verse 10, they saw the Elohim of Yasharal, and there was under his feet, as it were, a paved work of sapphire stone, as it were the body of heaven in clearness. So let me see you fly through that. Let me see you fly through some sapphire stone that he stretched across the sky. Okay, I want to... I wanted to find where the fire came down and consumed it. So let's go back to, oh, my pencil's dead. Exodus. Yeah. Exodus. Did I miss that? I know it was in Genesis, but I thought he did it in Exodus too.
So I am the sixth and breath life, and then how he appears, his character is fire, which is death. Right? Is that what you're getting to?
So out of all those scriptures we read, what is his character? What is he known as? You know what our character? We have certain characteristics about us, but what is his character after all that we read? Now remember, you have to know that he called Moshe to go back to Israel because he went back, and we read it in the 24th chapter. What did he reestablish with Israel?
Covenant.
So what is his character?
Covenant keeper.
He's covenant. His characteristics, the characteristics of our Father in heaven, is he is a covenant. He establishes covenant. Huh? Okay. Okay, let's go to Genesis 17. Genesis 17, and where were we? Let's look at 19. Let's look at Genesis 17 and 19, because now in Genesis 15 and at the beginning of Genesis 17, who does he make a covenant with? Okay, but in Genesis 15, who did he make a covenant with? Because we read it. We read a lot of Genesis 15. Abram, right? Well, he changed his name to Abraham in 17, but Abram in 15, he makes a covenant with Abram. He reestablishes a covenant in Genesis 17. He makes a covenant. He tells Sarah, I'm making this covenant is going to extend to who? Isaac, Yishak. It says it right here. I will establish my covenant with him for an everlasting covenant. So it goes from Abraham to Yishak to, after that it goes to Jacob, because we read that, remember? I even gave it to Jacob. So he gives it to Jacob, but now Moshe, we go to Exodus chapter 3, Moshe is going back to who? Now he went into Egypt as Jacob, but who is he coming out as? A nation, Israel. And what is he doing now with Israel? I have to reestablish this covenant. I gave it to Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. Jacob went into Egypt, but now as they're coming out, I'm going back into covenant practice. Not with a family now, but with a nation. Because he told Abraham, his name was Abram, right? So he changes his name from Abram to Abraham because you're what? The father of nations. And so he goes back and he has to reestablish this covenant. He even says it. I gave it to Abraham. We read it in Psalms. We read it in Chronicles. Remember we read in First Chronicles? We read it in Psalms. It went to Abraham, went to Isaac, went to Jacob. Jacob becomes Israel. In Exodus now, he sends Moshe. He says, I've got to reestablish my covenant. Remember what you were saying? Because it was supposed to be taught to them from the fathers to the son. They lost it. So he says, now I got to go back. I got to reestablish my covenant with Israel. And that's what he does from Exodus chapter 20 all the way to Exodus 24. He's establishing that covenant. And what did they say in Exodus 24? All that Yah, remember we read that? All that Yah says unto us, we will do. He didn't give them no book of the law. He's establishing his covenant with them. He's establishing the covenant. We see that at the beginning of Genesis 16. He makes a covenant with Abraham. What was that covenant with Abraham at the beginning of 17? It was circumcision. So you got to circumcise yourself and your sons because I'm giving you all this land. And before you enter into that land, you have to be circumcised. It was that circumcision was a land covenant for the land. That's why they had a problem, and Paul had to address it in Galatians, because Galatians, I'm not dealing with male covenant or adult male circumcision to enter into the land. I'm not dealing with that. He had to deal with that with Abraham, because when they were in the land, how did you know who could get into the temple and who couldn't? Whoever was the doorkeeper, the males had to open up their garments and they had to see if they were circumcised or not. If you weren't circumcised, you couldn't get in, because it was a covenant that was given to Abraham, and all of his sons had to be circumcised so that they could enter into the land. It's right up there in Genesis 17. But anyway, going down, he gives it to Isaac. He says, I'm going to pass this covenant now, not the circumcised covenant. I've given that to Abraham. When he's dealing with the 19th verse here, he's not dealing with the circumcision covenant. He's dealing with the covenant that is passing from Abraham over nation to Yishak, because it's going to go down to Jacob. Then in Exodus, he says, I got to go back and reestablish this covenant with Israel. And so he's dealing with Moshe there. But covenant, okay, covenant. Let's go to the Hebrew lexicon. This is Genesis 17:19. I hope everybody's still with me. I don't know. But covenant, H, 1285. All right. In the Hebrew lexicon, it's 1043, H, N4. H, N4. So we have to go down here. Here's the root word here, which is the bar is the root word. But let's go down here to, what did I say? H. It's H, N4. So I have to go down here to H, and that's what he's using it in the context of the verse. So scrolling down to H and then N4. Here's H, okay? Bara, which is eat, meat, covenant. So the grain is used as food for man or livestock. Livestock fed grains become fat and are the choicest for slaughter. Okay, so he's getting ready to explain to you what this covenant. Now let's go to N4, covenant. A covenant is instituted through a sacrifice of choice fatted animal, which is cut into two and the parties of the covenant passed through the pieces. Now, does that sound familiar? What does that sound like? Right. In Genesis, the 15th chapter, when he took the animals, he took the heifer, he took the she-goat and the two birds, but there was three animals, and he cut them up into pieces except for the birds, and then he set them apart, and we see that what happened, that smoky furnace, or so that smoky furnace that came down from heaven that walked in between the pieces, who was that? That was the Most High. He came down to walk through the pieces. He said, this is my covenant that I'm making to you. If he comes down, and another thing that he represents is the fire. So when the fire comes down, or the smoking furnace comes down and consumes the sacrifice, that's him keeping his part of the covenant. Notice what it says now. Okay, pass through the pieces. If one party fails to meet the agreements of the covenant, then the other may do the same to them. So if you make a covenant with the Most High, and how they made the covenant, they had to beef up and get a meaty animal, they cut it in pieces, and then they had to keep their end of the covenant, like they said, all that you say, remember it says in Exodus 24th chapter, all that Yah say we will do. Did they keep their end of the covenant? Notice now, it says, if one party fails to meet the agreements of the covenant, then the other may do the same to them. So what was done to those sacrifices? They were cut up and the blood was spilled. So what happened to Israel when they broke covenant with him? Because see, we don't quite understand the significance of keeping covenant with him. He's not going to break his covenant. What he's saying is, if you break your end of the covenant, you're going to die. And you're going to die like these sacrifices died. You're going to spill your blood. It's going to cost you your life. And they broke covenant with them. So when they broke covenant with them, well, let's see, when they broke covenant with them. And Deuteronomy 28. Let's see, there's so much here. Let's start with verse. There's a lot, there's several times, but there's some things that I don't want to go through all of these, but there's some things I want to pull out. More than once, let's look at the last phrase in 28:48 is until he have destroyed thee. Okay? 28:48. Then you go down to 51, and that last phrase is until he have destroyed thee. Okay? And then he talks about, there's several places where he talks about, okay, until thou be destroyed. And so I don't want to read all this, but what I want to show is the fact that they broke covenant, and because they broke covenant, like what was done to those sacrifices was going to be done to the party that broke covenant. That's what it's saying in the definition of that. So they had to be destroyed. If you enter into covenant with him and you break your covenant, because when he said that he's going to give them a covenant, how long was that covenant to last? Forever. It was an everlasting covenant. He's not a covenant breaker, so he kept his end of the bargain. But what Israel did is they did not keep covenant with him, and because they did not keep covenant with him, he had to destroy them. They were going to be destroyed because they broke covenant. So they had to be destroyed. And then let's go to Daniel 9 and 11. Daniel 9 and 11. Yea, all Israel has transgressed thy law, even by departing, that they might not obey thy voice. Therefore the curse is poured upon us, and the oath which is written in the law of Moshe, the servant of Elohim, because we have sinned against him. Now that they've been cut off, they broke covenant, they're cursed and everything, how does Israel get back into covenant practice with them? Because there was only one way back into covenant practice. They had to be adopted back. And how did they get back into covenant with him? Then you go to Isaiah 53. And actually, Isaiah 53 doesn't start here. What he's talking about here doesn't start here. Actually, it starts in 52 and verse number 13. Verse number 13 is where it starts. Yeah. 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 Right. And we say Isaiah 53, but back then they had the scrolls and stuff. They didn't have chapters and verses and stuff. They just had the scroll of Isaiah. He was reading Isaiah's scroll, and he came upon this where he paid the price for our transgression. The transgression of Israel, because he went to Israel, the transgression of Israel was because they broke covenant. They transgressed his law. They broke covenant. So remember now, if you break covenant, whatever happened to that sacrifice had to happen to you. And so they were beaten, they were bloodied, they were broken, they were destroyed, all of that. Israel went through all of that. And then we look at Isaiah 53 and we see in order for us to get back to him, we have to come through his son now. And his son actually pays the price. Now we paid the price for Israel, but the son paid the price for the sin of Israel. But who did he represent in that covenant? No, the son, who did he represent? He was the sacrifice, but who was he representing? The Most High. He was representing that side of it. Because in a covenant, you have to have two parties that go into the covenant. Well, in order for him to, and Israel was destroyed, but in order for him to say, okay, now that you're destroyed, you've been completely destroyed, okay, now how do we get you back? Well, in order to free him from that, the Son, or the representation of the Most High, who represent the Most High on his side of the covenant, he had to pay the price in the representing the Most High to get Israel back into covenant practice. In order to get Israel back into covenant, he had to represent the Father and he had to represent Israel. He had to represent both sides. That's why he was the son of Elohim and the son of Adam. He had both natures. He was divine and human because he had to represent both sides. He had to represent both sides. He was a mediator. He was the mediator between the Most High Yah and Israel, the people. Only one person can do that, to be that mediator, to represent the Father, who didn't break covenant, but he represented the Father, and then he had to represent the people, and so his humanity and the blood that he shed. Remember, it says that sacrifice, the people, whoever broke it, had to pay or do the same thing of that sacrifice. Well, he had to shed his blood. So the blood that he shed was the representation to bring the father and the children back into covenant practice. to reestablish the covenant. So only one person could do that, and that's our Messiah to do that, to bring us back into covenant practice. Now, what you were saying about the promises, so that we could understand what the promises are. Well, he gave all the promises that he gave to Abraham, okay? When you look at Galatians 3 and 29, and if ye be Christ, I'm about done. If ye be Christ, then are ye Abraham's seed, and you become heirs according to the promise. So now we have to look at, what did he promise Abraham? What did he promise Abraham? What did he promise him? He promised him all of this land. He gave him an inheritance, and the inheritance that he gave Abraham was land. I'm getting rid of all these nations, and Abraham and his seed are going to inherit all of this land. Now, from a when you look at it from a church perspective now, and most of our church perspective comes through the lens of the Roman Catholic Church. That's where we perceive this book, is through the lens of through Roman Catholicism. Because when you look at the promises of Abraham, now the Roman Catholic Church believes, well, we already have all the land. We don't want the land. What does the Roman Catholic Church want? What do they want? Huh? Huh? Power. They don't want this land down here. So if they don't want this land down here, what do they want? They want the Shamaim. They want the Shamaim. Because listen to what they most of the doctrine that we have from the church comes through the Roman Catholic Church. Most of the doctrine, not all of it, but most of it. And what they want is not what's on the earth, because pretty much let's see if I can explain this. Does anybody know what papal bulls are? Anybody know what papal bulls? Sister Walsh, you know anything about papal bulls? Papal bulls, dum diversus. Well, if you don't know papal bulls, then you're not going to know dum diversus and what that means. Have you ever heard of the sun never sets on England? The sun never sets on England, right? So what does that mean? The sun never sets on England, because they rule they rule over all nations and all countries. So wherever the sun is, that's where they have their reign and their rule. So the sun never sets on Mother England or anything like that. What does Catholicism mean? What does Catholicism mean? Universal. So the church is universal. Remember at the top of this lesson, I said that if the gospel had gone out to all nations like Jesus Christ had said, the end would come. Remember I said that at the beginning of this class? Okay. So if the what you say Catholic, which is universal, and Roman Catholicism is worldwide, there's not a nation that you can go into now where the Roman Church has not been, Catholicism has not gone. If that was the true gospel, then the end should have been here by now. Because Jesus says, when this gospel is preached to all nations, then shall the end come. Didn't he say that? So Roman Catholicism, which represents universal, and when you look up in your spare time, because I don't want to go through all of it today, I'm too tired, but papal bull and dum diversus, and look up what dum diversus is and understand what he's saying. The Roman Catholic Church, in a nutshell, the Roman Catholic Church went throughout all the land and brought in they colonized, brought in their religions and what they believed, what religion is or what faith is. And so all of this happened before the King James Version came out, which came out in 1611. I know I'm kind of going a long way around it, but you kind of got to, you can't see it in the frame of reference. You got to see the whole, the whole picture. A papal bull is a decree, and who puts out the decree? Yeah, okay. But when they put out a papal bull or a decree, what does it become? Law. So look up Dum Diverses and look up Dum Diverses and when Dum Diverses came out. It came out before Amerigo discovered what? What this land that is named after. America is named after Amerigo, which is a Roman. He's a Roman. Roman Catholicism has already gone worldwide. It's gone into every nation. And so what's that?
It says Pope Nicholas issued a papal bull, Dum Diverses, on June 18, 1452. And basically it says that Saracens or Muslims and pagans and any other believers to perpetual slavery.
That came out in 1452, and that was a papal bull that went worldwide, wherever there was a nation. So they went to explore the whole world, and wherever there was a nation or people, they just, by the stroke of a pen, they just took over by the stroke of a pen. They came here to this land and said, by a stroke of the pen, this is ours. And if you don't like it, we're going to kill you or whatever. You're going to practice our religion and everything like that. It's a papal bull that went worldwide. It was in Africa. It was already over in Europe. It went to Australia because the only other lands to discover besides Europe and Africa was Australia and what they call the New Americas. That was the only thing left to discover because they had already gone into Africa. They had already been, and Africa is, they call it the Mideast. It's not Mideast, it's Northeast Africa. But all of that's Africa. Asia was already there because in the book of Acts, the Holy Spirit told Paul and Silas not to go where? Into Asia. The Holy Ghost told them, don't go into Asia. So Asia was already there. So you had Asia, you had North Africa, you had Europe, you had all that area. So the only land for them to go to discover was Australia. And even when they went to Australia, there was people there. When they went to the Americas and South America, there was already people there. But through Dum Diverses, they went to all lands and they conquered all lands and they set up their religion. So if the gospel that the Roman Catholicism has, if that's the same gospel that Jesus Christ was talking about, then the end would already be here because they've been everywhere. The Roman Catholic Church has been. So it's not the gospel that the Roman Catholic Church has gone worldwide with. We cannot follow that gospel. So then it's like, well, what is that gospel? I didn't know it. So studying what the Roman Catholic Church gospel is, they believe that they're going to the Shamaim. They've already discovered the whole earth, everything. They want the Shamaim. That's where they're going. That's where they say they go after death. Everybody that believes that when you die, you go to the Shamaim, that's Roman Catholic Catholicism. Yeah, purgatory. That's Roman Catholic Catholicism. All of that. We're going to the Shamaim. There's people living up in the Shamaim. That's Roman Catholic That's Roman Catholicism. Because the people of the book, they know that the breath of life goes back to whoever gave it. This body goes back to the ground from where it came from. The soul goes to sleep. The soul goes to sleep. He has a resurrection where he's going to resurrect people. When Christ returns, he's setting up his throne on earth. And he's going to reign on earth. That's where he's going to be. It's simple. It's right there in the book. Roman Catholicism believes that they're going to the Shamayim. We're going to be up. They always want to be above Christ. Even when they call him Lord, lordship is beneath the king. When you go into a kingdom, you have the king, you have lords that are beneath the king. Their lords aren't above the king, they're beneath the king. So they even believe that Christ is actually beneath their throne. They want to go up into the Shamayim. So they're not going to the Shamayim. There's nobody in the only ones in the Shamaims now is our Heavenly Father. Christ is sitting on the throne, but there's stories in the Shamaim. There's stories in the Shamaim. Shaul went up to the third Shamaim, the third heaven, and he heard things that was not lawful for him. Actually, what we look at when we see the Shamaim and we see the stars and everything, that's a story or a level in the Shamaims, or in the Shamaim. But then on top of the stars, on the top of that is where his throne is. And it's a light that so when you look at space and everybody says, well, space is just black. Well, that's just a level or a story of the Shamaim, because when you get up to where his throne is, it ain't black. It ain't dark, and it's not a place for humans. Nobody human is going to be up there on his throne. Christ is coming down here on earth. That's what why would we say his second coming, or he's going to come again and he's coming on earth? And the Bible teaches us that when he does come, he's going to set up his kingdom here on earth. And he's going to reign for 1,000 years. Revelation simply tells us very explicitly to the detail that we're going to reign with him on earth. That's what it says. It says those who are born again will be able to get into the kingdom. That kingdom that he's talking about now is eternal. It's everlasting. It's eternity. That's the place that we want to go, is eternity. He didn't make the Shamaim and his throne where he's at now for us. That's not for us. What we're going to have, and I know, because I've said it, and I know a lot of people drop off. I've heard enough. They don't want to hear it no more. But when he gives us that body that's already made in heaven, he gives us that body that's going to be like unto him. That body is for us to live forever, and we're going to reign down here on earth for 1,000 years. We're going to reign with him on this as a kingdom. But then everything here is going to be burned up, and it's going to melt with fervent heat. And then there's a new heaven and a new earth. Then you see the city called heaven, and it comes down from the Shamaim to rest here on the earth. And those who have been born again of water and spirit will have access. It says we'll be able to go in and out of the city. And outside of that city is what you see in Genesis, the beginning chapter, where you see the Garden of Eden and the trees and the water and everything. That's going to be outside the city. And so, and then the earth is going to be so big, but it says there's not going to be any sea. It's going to look different than what we see today. So you're not going to see any more sea, and it will be populated. There will be population. And they said a child will be how old? 100 years. 100 years old, you're a child. And so you got the progression of life that's growing. And for us, we don't have to worry about dying again. He even says, I'm wiping away all your tears, all your sorrow. You won't have any more pain. You'll never have to worry about dying again. You'll be able to see the city. You'll have residence in the city. The city, the height of it is like going from New York to Miami. That's the height, which is, how many miles is that? So that's how high up the city is, the height. And then right. It'll be like the heavens when you get to the top of the city, because it's so high up. In Revelation, I think it says 1,500 furlongs. But if you look at 1,500 furlongs, that's like 1,200 miles. Well, from New York to Miami is like 1,200 miles, I think, and or something like that. And that's just the height of it. And then the breadth of it is the same as the height, and each side is 1,500 furlongs. So when everybody talks about the city and the streets of transparent gold and going sweeping through the city, I mean, it is a city that's so grand that Abraham said, I got to find that city. So in his day, it says he searched for a city whose builder and maker is the Elohim. Abraham searched for that city. What city was he searching for? What is revealed in Revelation? That's the city he's searching for. Now, John tried to describe it in the knowledge that he had. You know, he compared it to jewels. He compared the gates to a pearl. He's trying to use what he knows to describe the beauty and the awesomeness and, you know, how big it is. I mean, it's like, man, it'll blow you. If anybody's seen it, it'll blow their mind because it's made of jewels and it doesn't need the light of the sun. I mean, it's just a beautiful place, but it's not for everybody. It's not for everybody. But it's for us who are obedient unto him that live this life. But the thought that we're going up into the Shamaim where the Most High is right now, and you see all these little angels. Do you know? That in the um, the pontifice, which predates Christ, the pontifice. Do you know that they had what they called? They would actually recruit little girls into their pontificate, and they would have to. They said that they kept them virgins and stuff, but they were little girls. But whenever you see these angels and they look like little children and little girls and stuff, that comes from the cherubims and stuff. That comes from Roman Catholic. That comes from the pontifice, you know. And that's what they always wanted to do. They wanted to get up there into the Shamaim, but it's not a place for them. It's not a place for them. And I know a lot of people, you know, we understand, and that's why I say that we're all of us are products of our teaching. We're not products of revelation. We're products of our teaching. And what's taught us down through the years, that's what we believe. You know, unless you get a revelation and he shows it to you, and everybody doesn't give a revelation. Do you need a revelation to be saved? No, you know, because the teaching of the new birth, we've been taught that. We can see that in Scripture, what you must do. Because they asked him, what shall we do? They asked Peter, what shall we do? And he told them, you got to repent. You got to be baptized in his name. You got to be filled with his spirit. So we know that doesn't take revelation. That takes obedience. It takes repentance and obedience. The things of revelation, everybody doesn't get revelation, but that doesn't mean you can't be saved. Yes.
I have a question. So, because the Catholic faith or whatever, since they believe that and that's what they want, that to achieve or go whatever, you think it's based upon the belief that they've been so successful up to this point, and that kind of feeds their ego, you know, because like, it doesn't matter where you go, the Catholic doctrine, belief system is somewhere in it. Don't matter
Yeah,
where you go.
even in nations,
Wherever,
structures of nations and stuff.
Colleges, grocery store, whatever. But
Yeah.
churches. So do you think that kind of helps feed their, even the word, like the word of God, like there's Bibles where they've changed or taken out or added stuff to it, and the plan of salvation and this belief in you get a second chance to get it right if you want to go to heaven. You can't get it right in purgatory, you're going to hell. But do you think that kind of fed into their ego where they think they're going to get that in the end? Because it's so far, it seems like they're getting away with it, all the things that they have done throughout history, which is still perpetuated today.
Yeah.
It kind of seems like it's feeding their ego, like they really think they're pulling it off, like God's gonna be like, okay, I see what you've done, and
Yeah.
I'm gonna let you slide. You know, just I don't know.
And then it talks about that in 17th chapter of Revelation, because that great whore, it talks about that great whore. And what was her delicacy and what did she get drunk off of? The blood of the saints. Yeah.
And it's almost like, you know, like what you say, because God doesn't execute his judgment right then and there, we see we get away with it, like, oh, he didn't get me yet.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not that. It's just that he's not like us. Like if I see somebody do wrong, I want them punished right now. But God's not like that. He can
No, he can.
His patience is like eternal. But
Yeah, yeah,
it just seems like they're, I don't know, they're playing this thing like, oh, nothing's happened. We got away with it this many years, and we'll be okay. Because the Bible tells you how you die. That's how you're going to get up. If you die a sinner, you're going to get up a sinner.
yeah. There's no salvation in the graves. No, there isn't. So that belief that you can get saved in the grave and stuff, that's not true. That's not true. Okay, okay, all right, all right, all right. Shabbat Shalom. That just happens. I mean, that's why there has to be obedience, and you know, we get taught and we have to obey. Even like I showed, you know, Saul, and what got him cut off was simple disobedience. I mean, he disobeyed. He gave him a direct commandment. So it's our obedience. Revelation comes later, but yeah, there's some things that it does say that if you add anything, subtract anything, you're going to get the same plagues and curses of the book. And then you see in the 17th chapter of Revelation and what's going to happen to that great whore. And then it also talks about those nations. Because when he comes back, he's coming back to judge nations. So, you know, and he's going to, you know, destroy a lot of people. It says that in Isaiah 63. Where's that blood at that you got all over your garments? What's the blood of nations and kings and stuff? So, you know, we are I can't emphasize that enough. We're the product of our teaching. And so whatever we're taught, that's what we're going to believe. And so it takes, well, what if you don't have the right teacher? You know, what if you don't have the right teacher? Yeah, I mean, because Isaiah 9 and 16, Isaiah 9:16 says, the leaders of this people cause them to err, and they that are led of them are destroyed. And that's where Jesus said, if the blind lead the blind, all of them going in the ditch. And it's sad to think that, you know, so many people are deceived today. That's sad.
It's very sad
But
because in this era of technology, you can search out all matters. All you gotta do is take this little device and ask
yeah,
a question, and you get answers beyond what you're taught.
yeah,
And then you can see that we have been taught a lie in schools and things. You'll see it,
hmm
you know. And then they want to label you as a conspiracy theorist because you don't believe what they believe, but you actually found the truth, you know.
right, right. Those who have truth are few in number, and that's why Paul says, boy, if you didn't leave us a remnant, we'd be like Sodom and Gomorrah. We'd be gone, you know. And Jesus said that straight is the gate, narrow is the way. He says only a few people are going to find it. Only a few people are going to find it. So it's not like it's going to be a mass, you know, Exodus mass, you know, it's just a few people are going to find it. But one thing that we, you know, sometimes we don't take into consideration that, you know, procreation and life is going to go on while he's reigning here 1,000 years. It's still going to go on. And then on the new earth, there's going to be procreation, because he's not going to make an earth for it to be vacant. He says, I created the earth to be inhabited. I made it so that people would habitate on it. So even the new earth is going to have habitation. But for us, we're going to have eternal life, and we'll be like what did he say we'll be like? We'll be like the angels, you know, to where we have a body that we don't have to worry about death. We don't have to worry about decay. We don't have to worry about pain. We don't have to worry about sorrow. We don't have to worry about nothing like that. And so that's what we're going to. I would rather have that alternative than the other alternative, if I word that right. I'd rather have that than the alternative. That's what I want to say. I'd rather have that than the alternative, because there is going to be a place for all those who are disobedient and all of those who are transgressors. And when you see the plight of Israel, and you don't think he'll do that to you like he did to Israel, well, you're in for a rude awakening. You're in for a rude awakening, because if he does that to his own, what do you think he'll do to other nations? So yeah. If there's any other questions out there, you can. I don't know. Just let Brother Zeke know if you got any questions or any comments, and I'm just going to be here. We'll be here for a little while discussing, but I'm going to bring this class, this streaming class, to a close. And thank you all for coming in. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, cacofiowa.com. No, wait a minute. No, yeah. What is our channel? Anyway, Christ Apostolic Church of Iowa. Is that our channel? Christ Apostolic Church of Iowa. Subscribe to our channel and like us if you would. Also, submit your questions. If you got questions, submit your questions, and we'll definitely do our research and try to answer your questions. And with that, I say Shabbat Shalom, salute all the kings and the queens, all of the Hebrews and Shebrews, all of the brothers and sisters, those who are grafted into Jesus Christ. We say shalom to all of you, and hallelujah. Ezekiel, am I good? Ezekiel.